All right. So, the fasting and calorie restriction is one of my interests. However, and something that I practice myself, but by no means I'm the expert, but I wanted to stimulate your thoughts and then stimulate your interest because I believe it's one of the healthiest things that we could do. I think we are putting in way too much calories in this country. People really don't think about what it could potentially do to their body. So even a simple thing as just restricting the calories or stepping back from eating. And most people say, well, I don't want to do it because, they hate hunger. But if you give it a try, it's relatively easy to do. Many times, all you need is, either water, if you do water fasting for prolonged fasting. But for some people, if you can't do that, you don't necessarily have to do it that approach. And most people think that fasting is just drinking water for like a month or something, but it doesn't have to be that long. And then there's many different forms of fasting, and that's why I wanted to have a discussion with everyone. Okay, again, the content is from the Neogen Clinic, our lifestyle medicine and longevity clinic, so that we can help everyone live longer and live better. And everything we talked about today is for educational purpose only, because I am not your personal physician. So we're not giving anyone a medical advice. Okay, so what is fasting? And so basically the fasting is voluntarily not eating food for varying length of time. It could be for a day, it could be for many weeks. And many times it can be utilized for therapy for many different medical conditions, or it can be used to really optimize your health. And fasting has shown to be beneficial on human metabolism, health span, and it could potentially also increase your longevity as well. I'm just muting everyone. Thank you. Okay. And then also in different religions, they also use it as a spiritual practice as well. So consider the term breakfast. When we eat breakfast, what is it? I mean, you're really breaking the fast because you haven't eaten for a certain amount of time while you're sleeping, right? And so it's something that definitely that we want you to think about. So there's really two different forms, calorie restriction versus fasting. Both of them have lots of benefits and have very similar benefits. But the calorie restriction is basically reducing the average daily calorie intake below what is typically consumed without any kind of malnutrition or deprivation of any kind of nutrients. So on average, if you were eating 2,000 calories per day, and you're going to reduce that down to 1,600 calories per day, and make that everyday practice. And fasting is obviously a person doesn't eat at all, or limit the intake to very limited calories for a certain amount of time. And there's a lot of different variations to fasting as well. And especially with the time-restricted feeding, and a lot of people use many different terms. The most common term people utilize is intermittent fasting, and that term is more like an umbrella term for time-restricted feeding. A lot of people use that term for fasting 16-8 pattern, which happens to be the most popular kind. And so, but technically the 16-8 is a time-restricted feeding or time-restricted eating. And so more commonly eating in the window of 6 to 8 hours and not eating anything completely fasting except for water for anywhere from 12 to 16 hours. And then there's also alternate day fasting, and eating is unrestricted every other day, and 0 or minimum amount of calories depending on the technique that you like to utilize. And then and we'll go a little bit more into that. And then 5-2 eating pattern is eating unrestricted for basically 5 straight days, or some people do separate out those 2 days. But traditionally, it's 5 straight days, and with 2 days of either 0 or restricted calories. But then even then there's some variations, which we'll show. And then there's also, this is what most people think of as, if it's a fasting, either periodic or prolonged fasting, where calorie intake is restricted for multiple consecutive days, and typically longer than 48 hours. So it's anywhere from 48 hours to 5 days. But if you have different, serious medical conditions, then under supervision, you may consider either 2 weeks, even 30 days, and then at the fasting centers, you may do it even up to 90 days. I think the longest record for fasting is like 352 days, and it was in the Guinness Book of World Records. And the person lost like 270 pounds. And of course, he was given the electrolytes and vitamins and minerals, but didn't, and the rest of it was water for basically close to a year. So, so most of the studies have shown that calorie restriction and fasting has benefit, but majority of them happen to be animal-based studies, because and specifically the species that had short lifetimes, so that it'd be easier to study. And with the calorie restriction, there's studies where the rodents and other animals were given like 10 to 40% fewer calories than usual, and provided with all the necessary nutrients, but many showed extension of the lifespan, as well as reducing the risk, and then reducing the rates of the chronic disease, and especially cancer. And they had many different studies had a lot of success with treating cancer, especially with the animals. And also in warm fasting diet, increased lifespan by 40%. And then also fruit fly studies found that calorie restriction was associated with living longer and increasing their longevity as well. And then one study of male mice found that the lifelong alternate day fasting increased the longevity as well, and mainly by, in this case, delaying the cancer occurrence rather than other potential chronic disease. And this is a slide from the National Institute on Aging, and they supported 2 separate studies on the rhesus monkey, and to find out whether the calorie restriction had any effect on longevity. And of course, the rhesus monkey is a much longer lived species than most of the other animals they studied, such as the mice or worm or fruit flies. And the monkeys that were kept on calorie restriction diet, about 30% fewer calories than the control group for about 20 years. And both studies showed that calorie restriction reduced the incidence and prevalence of age-related disease, such as cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. And then the calorie restricted group had significantly lower age-related mortality, as well as all-cause mortality. So human studies are relatively limited. Obviously, we live a lot longer than most of the animals they studied, and most humans are not going to be participating in a study for over 20, 30, 40 years. But there are some studies, and some studies suggest that the calorie restriction may have a health benefit for humans also. But we do need a lot long-term studies. But already those studies have shown that it may increase human longevity, and then also decrease the risk factors that may cause the chronic disease. And there are also a group of people who voluntarily who have restricted their calories anywhere from 20 to 40%. If you go more than that, then you just cannot get enough nutrients, and then you will be malnourished. But there are a group of people who are practicing this to really extend their lifespan, and then really eating the food that's the nutrient dense. But looking at these group of population, they have shown they have a significantly lower risk factor for cardiovascular disease and diabetes, because they also tend to weigh significantly less. And for longevity purpose, the most optimal body BMI tends to be between 18.5 and 21. And in US, and the normal BMI is considered 25 and under, but longevity doctors believe that is too high, and you want it to be at least below 23 to have a very long lifespan. And then, but there are some studies that are ongoing, and the National Institute for Aging have sponsored the study called Comprehensive Assessment of a long-term effect on reducing intake of energy, calorie study. And they looked at about 218 individuals. They were about normal weight or moderately overweight individuals, and they divided them into two separate groups. And then this was supposed to be a 2-year study where one group ate the normal normal diet and normal calories, and then the other half group, experimental group, were instructed to eat 25% fewer calories per day than they had regularly consumed, but they weren't able to meet that target, and they were, but however, they reduced the calories by 12%. And the group, the experimental group, lost about 10% body weight after 2 years. And then when they went back 2 years after that, and they were able to maintain that weight loss as well. And so when they went and studied their biomarkers, and the experimental group have shown they reduced the risk factors for the diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. They also had significantly lower blood pressure as well as a cholesterol. And it's been known for a very long time that fasting is really good for lowering the blood pressure as well as lowering obviously the cholesterol. And then also they showed the decrease in a lot of the inflammatory factors as well as thyroid hormone. And then there's some evidence that showed that lowering these level of biomarkers are associated with the longer lifespan, and then also decreasing the potential chronic disease. Also, and there were no negative effects of the calorie restricted individuals, that the 50% that participated in the experimental side. But there's some other additional favorable the factors were it improved their mood, improved their quality of life, sexual function, as well as sleep. Okay, and then and moving on to the fasting, and these are some of the more again the common type of fasting, and we'll go into individual ones. And then again, the time restricted eating, which is 16/8, the alternate day fasting, 5-2 eating pattern, and then prolonged fasting, which are for last about 2 to 5 days. And then most common is the water fasting. And then there are also something that's relatively new, which is considered the fast mimicking diet. Oops, I think I skipped over a slide here. Sorry about that. There are some human additional observation studies, and especially looking at the blue zones, and by Dan Buettner. He's been studying the cities across the world that has the most amount of centenarians for past 20 somewhat years, and many of them have common themes, which is either reducing their calories, or also many of them practice fasting as well. And his a study showed that there's long-term calorie restriction may help with the longevity. And especially like in Okinawa, they practice something called hara hachibu, which means they follow 80% rule, and they stop eating when they feel 80% full. And then if they wait additional 20 minutes, and they are going to be completely full. And this prevents them from obviously eating too many calories, which may lead to weight gain and chronic disease. And a number of other studies have shown that eating slowly can reduce the hunger and increase the feeling of fullness compared to eating very rapidly. And this is because it takes about 20 minutes for your body to release the hormone to allow your brain to know that you're full. And so if you eat so rapidly, you could be eating about 120% of that would make you full. So by eating slowly and eating until you feel about 80% full, you may be eating fewer calories and then feel full longer. Okay. Yeah, I've briefly mentioned that slide wasn't moving. So, we'll go a little bit more into different types of fasting. So, what doesn't kill you make you stronger, okay? And so the fasting simulates something called hormesis. And it's basically a compensatory defense response following exposure to mild stressor. So by stressing your body, you're basically making your body stronger. And hormesis, it triggers a wide variety of protective mechanisms at the cellular level, and then also helps you repair the damaged cells, and then also provides protection from exposure to more devastating stressors. Okay. And again, the most common form of time-restricted feeding is what they call 16-8. It's actually, it's eating within the 8-hour window, and then also fasting for 16 hours. But most of the studies have shown that if you can fast about 13 hours, that you have a lot of health benefits, just as much health benefits as 16. And there are really no study that compares the 12 to 13 to 16. But there's a study which I will mention where by fasting 13 hours a daily with the breast cancer survivors, it has decreased their recurrence rate by like 38%. And it's something that we definitely want to practice because it also, it's in line with our circadian rhythm, and then also helps really restore a healthy gut microbiome as well. But also during that eating window, most of the time-restricted eating practitioners say that you can eat anything as much as you want during that 8-hour window, but obviously you would want to eat things that are much healthier for you, which I would recommend whole food plant-based as much as possible. Okay, and it has a significant benefit in our metabolic health. So when the study participants ate about 3 different standardized meals in a 6-hour window per day, they experienced a decrease in appetite, increased fat metabolism compared to when they ate 3 standardized meals, were similar in calories and composition during the 12-hour window per day. And another study which involved the obese individuals who followed the 8-hour time restricted eating regimen for 12 weeks found the participants experienced about 3% weight loss compared to the control group. And then also, most popular form of time-restricted eating is skipping breakfast and start eating at noon for lunch, and then finish eating at 8 p.m. And that's what is most promoted because it's easier for people to skip breakfast, but that doesn't mean that is actually the best way. So I like to present, the scientific evidence why breakfast is more important and then having the dinner. And so there has been studies with the men with type 2 diabetes, and so half the group ate early. So they ate from 8 to 5, and this was within the 9-hour window. And then the second group ate their meals, same calories, exactly same food, between 12 to 9 p.m. But the early group experienced 36% additional reduction in glycemic response to a meal, as well as a reduced fasting triglyceride. And there were another also a study where the military personnel who were overweight by 100 pounds, they went on time-restricted eating studies. And then in this case, they only ate one meal a day, either everything exactly the same meal, same calorie in the morning as a breakfast or as a dinner. And the group that ate in the morning lost more weight, but the group that ate one meal a day and fasted the rest of the day did also lose weight as well. However, the group that ate early had significantly lower blood pressure, and then all the biomarkers were significantly better than the group that actually had a delayed eating routine. Both groups also improved blood sugar levels. However, you are a lot more insulin sensitive if you eat in the morning versus in the evening. So again, even with the blood sugar level, the group that ate early, even though they both did the ate same number of hours and then fasted for same number of hours as well, but the morning group did significantly better. Same thing with the blood pressure, and then the biomarker for lipid oxidative stress, as well as a weight loss. The weight loss was pretty similar, even in the early group was slightly better. Okay. And then also the time restricted eating, there are some studies that have shown that it can enhance the muscle mass and exercise performance. I think the study is not as strong, but definitely have shown that. And within that study also showed that the participants were able to reduce the blood sugar level, blood insulin, and fat mass, and then while maintaining good muscle mass as well. And then the athletes experienced muscle hypertrophy and performance similar to controlled diet group. And then within the animal study, it also has shown that it enhances the aerobic capacity. And then also in the animal studies, it also has shown that it enhances the longevity, even with the time-restricted feeding as well. And then the mice that were fed one meal per day lived approximately 11 to 14% longer when fed the same calorie content as mice that ate freely, all day long, but they ate the same amount of calories and same type of food. Okay, so there are additional studies also show that the effects of the early time-restricted eating versus late, and the one who ate the early, they both benefited from the glucose level and lowering the evening cortisol, but it was significantly better for the early time-restricted eating group. And they also had higher BDNF, which is a brain-derived neurotrophic factor level. BDNF helps promote surviving of the nerve cells, and then it improves the brain function. Also increase the ketone beta hydroxybutyrate, and that demonstrates that in the short-term daily fasting can modestly increase the circulating ketone, which is your brain can also utilize as a form of energy as well. And then they also saw a change in gene expression, and then the level of autophagy when you talk about the fasting, and then you will hear a lot of terms related to autophagy, which is basically truly cellular detoxification, and then getting rid of the old damaged cells and taking out the good parts, and then and then regenerating the cells. And all these gene expression has definitely been increased with the fasting as well. And then also with cancer, I think I mentioned this study, the women who were in remission for breast cancer who underwent time-restricted eating, they ate within the 11-hour window and then fasted for 13 hours. They experienced about 36% reduction in breast cancer recurrence. And then a lot of people, one of the more common questions we also get asked is that hey, if we do fasting, can we drink coffee? As long as it's black coffee, and this group allowed coffee, but only black coffee, because if you put in cream, you're adding fat, and you're essentially breaking the fats because it has fat. It also has carbohydrates, and it also may have amino acids in there. And so then you're essentially breaking the fast. If you really do need a caffeine in the morning, then we encourage to utilize black coffee. So another form is the alternate day fasting, and so essentially what it comes down to is even if every other day, so you're essentially fasting for about 36 hours and eating within 12-hour window, and because you're obviously not going to be eating in that 24-hour period, but so it tends to be 36 to 12, and most of the benefits were very similar. Everyone who participated, as long as they were compliant with the program, they lost the weight, lost the blood sugar level, lowered their cholesterol. But the studies showed that when you are participating in these studies, and the group that actually had the healthier diet obviously did better than the group that basically ate whatever they want or as much as they wanted. And the other form is the 5-2 eating pattern, or 5-2 fasting, or 5-2 diet. And so you can do it in several different ways. And the most common way used to be where you would eat normally for 5 days and then fast for 2 days with water fasting. And I think that's how Jimmy Kimmel, the night talk show host, how he lost so much weight. But then there's variations that have come about. And so the days when you are fasting, now people are doing about 500 calories for women and then 600 calories for men. So you're not, starving. And then rather than doing 2 straight days, and some people are, spreading those days like at the day 2 and day 5, as mentioned here. But they have also noticed all the benefits that we talked about. But also they did a study where it was a small study with 24 women, and they also found that it had protective effect against the breast cancer as well. So then there's the prolonged fasting, which is probably what most people think of when they think about fasting or water fasting. So prolonged fasting is also known as a periodic fasting, and it typically is 2 to 4 days or 2 to 5 days. And essentially, so like long-term food deprivation, right? And this has a much greater effect on your body. And then the first 2 days, people are typically pretty hungry, and we encourage them to drink a lot of water to create that, the volume feel in their stomach. But usually, and they may experience some headache, but usually by end of day 2, they feel somewhat of euphoria, and then they stop getting hungry. And then also, it's very important that you don't do a lot of activities. Typically just recommend just resting as much as possible. At most, just light walking, but really no exercising, because when you do, then you're actually slowing down the detoxification process. And then usually by day 3, it's when your body uses up glycogen, and then you go into the ketosis. And these are some of the reasons why people who promote ketogenic diet, they think this is healthy, but it's a periodic ketosis that your body needs to go into, not at the constant rate. And then also what you eat. With fasting, what people don't realize is that the refeeding is the most important part. Not that and then fasting is important also, but the most of the health benefit that you get is after you are refeeding your body after you have gone through the fasting period. Okay. And then the most common is the water fasting. And then there's also something new after a long research by the Dr. Walter Longo, something called fast mimicking diet. So essentially, you're not fully fasting. It's not water fasting. However, it mimics the effects of the water fasting, in which we will go in. So water fasting is obviously water only. You may take some magnesium, about 400 to 600 milligrams per day as an electrolyte. And we encourage everyone to drink at least a gallon of water per day. So whether you're fasting or not, I always promote people drinking about a gallon of water per day. And most people live in a state of dehydration. Number one cause of headache is dehydration. Number one cause of constipation is dehydration. And so, taking magnesium may help those individuals who are doing it for anywhere from 2 to 5 days with their headache. Also, help them sleep, and then also it helps them prevent muscle cramps and muscle function. And typically, we would recommend a water fasting anywhere from 1 to 4 days. And if you're going to do anything longer than that, then you may need to speak with your physician, and then you may need to be supervised. Typically, most people can do it pretty safely for 2 to 4 days at home. And you should avoid fasting, if you experience commonly gout, if you have diabetes. You can fast, and especially for diabetics, both type 1 and type 2, you just need to speak with your physician and then and do it under supervision in the beginning. However, it can really help with controlling your blood sugar levels. So, but you may caution doing the long-term water fasting. So rather than long-term water fasting, then the diabetics may undergo juice fasting instead, so that they're able to get some glucose. And if you have this eating disorder, or if you're older adults, if you're pregnant and your kids, then you should really avoid water fasting. So fast mimicking diet, it's developed by the Dr. Walter Longo. He is a fairly famous longevity doctor, PhD, who's has a lab in USC, so in Southern California, and developed something called Prolon fast mimicking diet. Basically, it's a packaged meal. It's a whole food, plant-based, but mostly dehydrated packaged food that you eat for 5 days. And so day one, so instead of just water fasting, and then day one with the package, a lot of it's considered like dehydrated soup, like crackers, tea, and that's what it consists of. And it's approximately about 1,000 calories. And the macro nutrients are distributed like 10% protein, 56% fat, and 34% carbohydrates. And then from day 2 to day 5 is approximately about 725 calories with similar amount of protein, but then the less fat and then higher contents of carbs. And then they consider this as a low carb because it's 34 and 47%. And if you do typically whole food plant-based, you're eating about 70-75% of your calories are coming from carbohydrates, right? And the goal is to cause your body to mainly generate energy from non-carbohydrates. So you're depleting your glucose and glycogen storage, and then utilizing other means, through either gluconeogenesis, and then also converting the fatty acids into ketones, and then for your brain to to utilize ketone as energy source. And then essentially this calorie restriction mimics the body's response of a traditional fasting method. And his studies showed that just as well as water fasting, doing a fast mimicking diet has shown the cell regeneration, stimulating and activating stem cells, decreasing inflammation and fat loss as well. And he developed this because most people, although they strongly recommend water fasting, most people will not do it. And most people, quit after one day. And then they also done a lot of research with the cancer patients, and a lot of cancer patients before their chemotherapy think you're absolutely crazy if they ask you to starve for 5 days before you go into chemotherapy. And unfortunately, a lot of oncologists don't have that knowledge also. And then we all know that sugar and protein feeds the cancer process. However, I've heard from so many cancer patients that their oncologist told them to go have plenty of chicken and eat lean meat and get plenty of protein before you go into a chemotherapy, which is one of the worst things that you can do, because you're actually activating the growth pathway at the cellular level. And we'll briefly mention things like the mTOR and the insulin-like growth factor 1 that actually promotes the growth. And so when you're battling the cancer, you don't want things to grow, right? And so this is why through his research and developed the fast mimicking diet. And then the fasting specialist also thinks that you don't necessarily need to spend $250. It's easily packaged for you to do it, but eating nice healthy salad, twice daily, and that comes out to about 500 to 700 calories per day. So essentially, you could be mimicking the diet that costs significantly less by eating salad. So, but there has been a lot of studies that's been done that has shown that fast mimicking diet will help you lose weight, also increase insulin sensitivity, just as well as, may not be just as well, but a good amount compared to the water fasting, reduce cholesterol and reduce inflammation, lower cancer markers, and also support brain health, and then also stimulate the autophagy. So overall, the benefit of the fasting is essentially it's a negative calorie balance, right? And so, which is simply energy expenditure exceeds the energy need. It has shown with all different forms of fasting, it burns the glycogen and the fatty acid, increase the insulin sensitivity. It may increase the longevity. And even the animal study have shown that 20 to 50% reduction in calorie intake can increase the lifespan up to 50% on different species. And then the delayed onset of chronic disease such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and autoimmune disease. And then also it helps improve the function of endothelial cells, which if you know me, I think the nitric oxide is one of the most important molecules in our body that it gets depleted. By the time you're 40, you lose about 50%. By the time you're 60, you lose about 85% of your ability to produce nitric oxide. But it helps improve the function of endothelial cells. Just like nitric oxide, the fasting, especially the prolonged fasting, have demonstrated that it can increase and stimulate the stem cells, and then including the progenitor cells that may replace the damaged endothelial cells. Also reducing the cardiovascular inflammation and reducing the cholesterol, triglyceride, boosting the brain function, and then also prevention of the neurodegenerative disorder. Obviously helps you with the weight loss. And then many animal studies that have shown that it can prevent and even reverse cancer. And then also, people who've got serious medical conditions who need to be observed and then do a more long-term fasting, like 30 to 90 days. A great place is in California called True North Health Center. And they have actually been able to, through fasting, being able to reverse even lymphomas. And they've been able to help many patients reverse, hypertension and cardiovascular disease and other degenerative disease. And so, and reduction in cancer incidence. And of course, by reducing the body weight, and then obesity is the third most common reason why somebody dies from cancer based on MD Anderson studies. And so by reducing the body weight, and getting into the healthy body weight, you are going to also limit the potential risk of cancer. And then also reducing the inflammatory cytokines and reducing the growth factors, especially, which basically is a promoter of the cancer cells, right? And then also reducing the oxidative stress, improving the DNA repair process, and then reduce cell replication rate, which are all help reduce the risk of cancer. Okay. So like when you look back at the blue zones, they also do not just like Okinawa, they're most known for calorie restriction because they eat, they stop eating when they're 80% full. However, like places like Ikaria, and they're typically Greek Orthodox Christians, and then they have many fasting for different religious holidays. And then the Blue Zone studies showed that during, especially after fasting during the religious holidays, they noticed the people in Ikaria lower their cholesterol as well as reducing their body mass index as well. And they walk every day, and then and they eat lots of beans. So if you haven't read it, you should check out Dan Buettner's book, Blue Zones. Okay, so the fasting, this is very confusing, a slide, but I couldn't find a really good representation of, the mTOR signaling pathway. And most of you may not be really interested in this. However, just wanted to give you some statement about the benefit of fasting at the cellular level, why this is so healthy. Because the mTOR is essentially a growth signaling pathway stimulated by protein and specific types of amino acids. But with fasting, it's down regulates this whole mTOR pathway, and mTOR stands for mammalian or mechanical target of rapamycin. And this decreasing this effect have shown at first they studied on the yeast because they obviously have a very short lifespan, that it has shown to increase the lifespan. And then also even with mice, when they have given rapamycin, which inhibits this whole mTOR signaling pathway, it has increased the lifespan of mice as well. And part of the reason is by decreasing the mTOR activities, your body also upregulates autophagy, and then also it removes the dysfunctional cells, and that's what the whole autophagy is. If there are a lot of cells that get used, they're damaged, they're old, and then your body needs to clear them out. They do that through autophagy, and by day 3, your autophagy gets much more upregulated, and then you're able to clear out a lot of the damaged cells, or it's like going to a junkyard, taking out the part that still works, and then removing and getting rid of the damaged cells. And so if you do a prolonged fasting, your organs actually shrink, and then your cells, your body is getting rid of all the damaged or old cells, and then keeping only the newest and the well-functioning cells. And then that's why the refeeding becomes very, very important, because they're all starving. And so after fasting, you can't be eating, Krispy Kreme and donuts, but instead you want to feed them what they really need, the nutrient-dense food. So, and then also the overactivation of the mTOR signaling pathway have shown to increase the different forms of cancer. And so by inhibiting that, and the study have shown that it can decrease the prevalence of breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung, melanoma, bladder, brain cancer, and then also even kidney cancer as well. And then also the early studies have shown that the upregulation, if the mTOR signaling pathway gets overstimulated, and this could potentially be also associated with the Alzheimer's as well. So I talked about the autophagy. It's basically, it's a way your body to clear out the damaged cells. Certain cells already are programmed. If they are a certain age or they're damaged, the basically cell has a program where basically it kills itself. So then it gets expelled. However, there are certain cells that lose that ability or don't have it. So you got to actually stimulate the whole autophagy, and again, it's the body's way of cleaning out the damaged cells, and then allows your body to regenerate a brand new cells, and then also activating the stem cell as well. And usually it takes about if you do prolonged fasting, it usually takes about 3 days. There are a lot of people who says, well, the time-restricted eating, when you do 16-8, it also stimulates the autophagy. Those studies are relatively weak. It may, but really not as much as if you are actually doing the full, at least minimum 3 days of water fasting or fast mimicking diet. And then also it gets rid of that, senescent cells, and then those are the cells that is too old or damaged, and then and they just become really inefficient, and they get accumulated in your system, and then so it helps you get rid of the senescent cells. And of course, the fasting also helps you decrease inflammation as well. Okay. So overall, some of the benefits of the autophagy, when there's a lot of different places where they say, get this juice and then do detox, and they have so many kind of detox programs. I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. But the only true detox that I know is through fasting by increasing and activating the autophagy. And so these are some of the benefits of autophagy: increasing the longevity, improving your metabolism, helping not only your brain, but your central nervous system, decreasing the cancer. And there's been a lot of studies with fasting and suppressing the cancer because it limits the growth and limits the insulin-like growth factor 1, and then suppresses the mTOR. And so those are some of the main reasons why it is great for cancer treatment. And then also cancer cells, essentially they're lazy and they want an easy way to survive. And so by starving them, your cells can adapt to that fasting state, but a lot of times cancer cells cannot. So we think that it makes them weaker. And then if you do actually undergo chemotherapy, they become much more sensitive, and chemotherapy becomes more effective. And of course, decreasing the inflammation and decreasing the blood pressure, enhancing the, optimizing your lipid panel, and enhances your cardiovascular health, and then also improves and helps repair the damaged DNA. And there also, along with the autophagy, so your body also goes through mitophagy as well. So mitochondria is essentially the power house and power plant within the cells, right? It's one that generates the energy, and is one of the most important organelle in our cell. But then there's a lot of disease that is caused by the mitochondria dysfunction. And mitochondria is where a lot of the oxidative stress comes from. And so we want to make sure that it's in great condition. And if it's not, then we, just like the old damaged cells, we also want to get rid of it as well. So fasting also stimulates the mitophagy. It's the same thing as autophagy. Basically, any damaged mitochondria, it basically takes out the good parts and then gets rid of it. And so the fasting stimulates the whole metaphagy process. So the calorie restriction and the fasting has many different health benefits, and it goes through so many different processes. And this is only barely not even scratching the surface. But in summary, it increases your insulin sensitivity and decreases the sexual hormone, increase the stem cell function, and then decrease the damaged cells, increase the mitochondria function, and it does that through suppressing the insulin-like growth factor, and then also mTOR. This is the insulin-like growth factor is one of the reasons why we recommend against so much the animal-based products, and because it really stimulates the production of insulin-like growth factor. When you're young, when you need to grow, then you need insulin-like growth factor. But once you're an adult, only thing that's going to grow is your cancer cells. So it's a fine balance. Yes, we do need it, but we don't really need to upregulate so much of the insulin-like growth factor that's going to help stimulate growth of the cancer. Because everyone that's on this call have cancer, basically cancer cells in their body. It may not be clinically significant yet. However, if you live long enough and if you have a poor lifestyle, then eventually it is going to become clinically significant. And then also, of course, helping you with the tissue repair, and then increasing the autophagy and decreasing the inflammation. And so with all these things, it's going to not only help you increase your lifespan, but also health span as well. So you want to not only live longer, but you also want to live better as well. So once you're done with the fasting, typically if you're doing like time-restricted feeding, like the 16-8, or eating every other day, or 5-2, then you don't really have to worry about the refeeding. And so if you do it less than, but then if you do it between 48 hours to 72 hours, reintroduction with the proper food is very important. And so if it's less than 72 hours, just for the first day, return to whole food, plant-based and nutrition, and start with like the vegetable juice or soup, steamed vegetables or smoothies, any kind of food that has higher water content. And then after the next day, you can go back eating your normal healthy plant-based nutrition. If you do something longer, anywhere from 3 to 5 days, then the first day, same as what I mentioned. And then the second day, then you can start to introduce raw vegetables. Because raw vegetables are a little bit harder on your GI. So you want to give yourself at least a day before you really start to introduce them. Okay. And then by third day, you can return to your normal whole food plant-based nutrition. If you do anything longer than 5 days, then of course you need to be supervised, and then you may have to go to fasting centers like the True North. I mentioned them, but I'm not affiliated with them, but I know they do great work. I've read a lot of studies from them, or other fasting centers, but they may introduce the food a lot slower and allowing your gut to get used to feeding yourself again. And then also if you do the fast mimicking diet, then and the refeeding is not as important. But we believe that the refeeding is, especially if you do a prolonged fasting, is very, very important. But every day also, after you fast for, let's say, anywhere from 12 to 16 hours, reintroducing the food is very important. And so you want to reintroduce it with the healthiest food, most nutrient-dense food, because that's what your cell needs, especially after undergoing the fast. Okay. I think that is my presentation for this evening. And if you have any questions, you want to have any kind of discussion, we are wide open.